All right, another one here. So Dapper King's asking, how should you prepare for an SRE interview? Currently an SRE applying somewhere else. I have 3 interviews with the same company, one with a recruiter and then one with an HR and technical interview. What should I do to prep for the next 2 interviews? They haven't really told me what to prep for. SRE is such a big term. I'm not a professional in terms of like helping people prepare for interviews. I personally believe that the interview process should be more natural, and that you should probably, if you've spent all the right time on the things that interest you, as well as you've done the research into the company before you apply, that a lot of these interview questions answer themselves, because you're already ready for it. You don't need to overthink it, but we all overthink it. I did, so. And what does SRE even mean? So there's a couple of questions embedded into that question. So the first one is SRE, Site Reliability Engineer, is a Google term for basically a system administrator who codes. I mean, somebody who logs into computers and takes care of them, and infrastructure and services, and keeps it running, but also is responsible for keeping it up. And they're paid usually based on uptime, like 949s we used to say, 99.99% uptime. Their income is based on how reliably they can keep everything running, and so that's the job. It's had many names in the past. In the past, it used to be called a system administrator. But these days, SRE is Google's term. They wrote a book about it, which just makes me laugh, because the job has been around for a long time before them inventing some new term for it. And it just means that, and you've always had to code to be able to do that job anyway, by the way. So that's the answer. That's the first thing. So that's what an SRE job is. And then how do you prepare for an interview about that? Well, it depends on the interview, right? Because there's multiple interviews, one with the HR person, one with the recruiter, and a technical interview. Imagine the next interviews are going to be probably more technical related, but they're going to be like, let's go do deep dives into the specific technology we want you to learn or something. Who knows? Every company's different. The best way to prepare for that, I believe there's 2 really great ways to prepare for any interview. The first one is really, really show genuine interest in the company that you're interviewing for. That means do your research, study what they do. Ask why it is that they have this job, not to yourself, not to them. Like, go research it all. Go read about the challenges that they face as a company. Get into the company. In fact, I wouldn't even apply to work for a specific company until I had done that research. If you do that, then the questions about what you should say when they say, do you have any other questions, all that stuff, those are all going to answer themselves, because you are already done. You already have questions because you've already independently research them, and you've created for yourself sort of an internal set of things that you want to know more about. So, and in my particular case, I had a question, and it's like, I was really curious because they deal with a lot of doing infrastructure engineering for machine learning, and they were collecting a lot of data. And I asked them, I said, well, what is your take on what's going on with this company and this data? What are you guys doing with this data? I mean, you don't have to tell me what you're doing, but what is your take about where this could go? And it spun off into a rather interesting conversation, which ended up being kind of a rabbit hole in the interview, because we just spent a lot of time talking about it. And it was fun. And I believe that it contributed to, me being accepted, because it demonstrated that I don't know that. I'll never. The hard part about interviews is nobody tells you what worked and what didn't. The thing that didn't work, by the way, is asking my potential boss where his accent was from, because I'm interested in foreign languages. That was not the time to ask that. That was a stupid mistake of my part. Don't ever do that, because it's none of your business. It's an interview. Your accents make no. I was trying. It was as a personal level. At a personal level, I was sincerely interested to know his background, because I like to know about everybody that I want to work with. And it has nothing to do with any sort of racism or culturalism. I just wanted to know, but I asked him, and it's inappropriate. That's like asking you, what gender are you? That you don't ask those kind of questions during an interview, at least not during a job interview. And that was a fail. So don't do that. But I mean, but I think that's kind of part of the first thing, though, expressing sincere interest in the company that you're asking to work, that you're considering working for. And that includes sincere interest in the people who work there, including the people that are interviewing you. And if you can show sincere interest in them and in their background during the interview, by perhaps comparing notes. I had a really positive experience with the tech person who was interviewing me because they had a lot of Linux experience from the past. And so we were able to bond a little bit over that. And I'm like, oh, and talk about those things. And so I think that that's the thing. Long answer about my accent. Yeah. And so the other thing too is just know your shit. And I apologize for the swear word, but don't go into an interview unless you actually know how to do the stuff you're applying for. And if you don't know it, don't lie. That's sort of related to that. So the thing, and I don't know what they're going to do on your particular interview for SRE, but my interview, and God knows, we'll see if this has been successful. Ask me in a year if I'm still the same person, right? And I'm still at the same place. I think I will be, based on the interview that I had today, actually, with the person who hired me, kind of a checkpoint milestone thing. I believe I will be, based on the positive vibe in that particular meeting. But I told them point blank when they hired me, I do not know Kubernetes, and then I had to learn it. And at one point I had to say, I've never created a Docker file. I didn't say that in the interview. I wish I had. And the person interviewing me was very polite and friendly and quick to say, oh, well, you'll learn it. It's not that bad. It's actually pretty damn bad. But I love it. It's a great challenge. But the point being, so the second point is, know what you're being interviewed for. Know what you are being, what you're being what's being expected of you, and be able to talk about it. And that means going for an interview for something that you think you might be qualified for. Bad idea. It's a bad idea. It doesn't mean you have to know everything on the list. No one ever does. Right? So don't let that stop you from interviewing. But at the same time, don't waste people's time by interviewing for stuff that you have no business interviewing for. Because when you go into the interview, you're already going to be confident because you've got X and Y project that shows that you've done it. Or you've had this experience at work and a previous employer, and you can talk about how you did it. And you can say, I did this thing. So point one, make a bond with the company, show interest in the company and the people at the company within reason of appropriateness, and it's to form that thing. And number two, know your shit. I mean, know it. Don't go into the interview not knowing stuff. If you're afraid of a technical interview, that means that you're somehow not prepared for it, because there's some piece of it. You should search yourself and say, well, what am I missing? I mean, you're going to have a lot of imposter syndrome. God knows I did. I mean, I knew that, I was interviewing. The only reason I even took this interview, by the way, is because the job description specifically said, we are not looking for DevOps people. They said they were specifically looking for an infrastructure engineer who had broad expertise and 10 years of Linux experience. I'm like, hell yeah, I got that. 10 years of Linux experience was the minimum required to even interview for this job. And it's pretty obvious. I mean, after you have 10 minutes of Linux experience, by the way, you can pretty much do anything else. Because you can figure it out. And that's what this job, if that had not been in the job description, if they had said 5 years or more of Kubernetes experience, I would have thrown it away and I would have gone to the next thing. Or I would have certified in Kubernetes or something. I wouldn't even consider this opportunity. So that little rant segment is about point two. Know your stuff. Make sure you know what you're doing, and you'll be fine. You don't really need to care what the interview is going to be about. And if you go into the interview confident that you know how to do the job, you know what the job is, more or less, that you've researched the company and you're interested in the company, you got something to ask them, then you can just be calm at that point. At that point, you can just be calm and build some relations of trust with the person that you're interviewing with. And it doesn't have to be scary. At that point, it doesn't have to be scary. I don't believe the job interview should be scary. I don't. I think that it should be. I think it's a good sign of a good company when the interview process doesn't scare you. If you are terrified of the interview process because you're afraid you're going to pass and everything, and there's this antagonistic relationship between you and the hiring team, and they're already pitting you versus them to see if you can prove whether you're good enough or not, that I think that's a horrible environment. I would never work for a company like that. I want to work for a company that's going to nurture their relationship with me, and a company that I'm going to be able to be open with and casual with, as well as professional with, and a company that I want to deliver for. Even if it's not my primary goal in life to work for this particular company, it's contributing to the world in ways that I like. And so it's easy. The interview was easy because the interview was just us talking about my interest in the company and my interest in the technology related to the job, and the rest of the interview went really well. So, and I got hired based on the first interview I had. I mean, that's not true. That's not completely true. Let me be fair. I did have one interview with a CEO for another company, which was a great company. It just wasn't a match for me. It was, first of all, it was based on cryptocurrency, so I had no business being there. It actually caused me to really dig deep into my soul and ask if I wanted to support cryptocurrency as a technology at all, even for X and Y purpose that's not specifically getting rich. That interview and that's somebody else that I met here. I'm really fond of that person that introduced me to that, and then I interviewed with a fantastic human being, but it just was not the right fit. But this other one was. So hopefully that would help. Software engineer, may I suggest a tip for hiring managers? Yes, please. Any of you who have any video tips out there, please go read about them. We're in this together, literally. 5 years of Kubernetes might as well be Kubernetes developers. Yeah, I know. Been an SRE for 3 years. Yeah. Well, the feeling that you're lying all the time is, and I did it. There's a video. Please go watch it. It's called "I Suck, I Rock." If you're trying to, and it's sort of related to the interview question. I suck, I rock, and I'm having to apply the things that I've said in the video to myself right now because I'm going through the biggest imposter syndrome I've ever had in my life. But I'm not an imposter. The difference between being an actual imposter and a real imposter is saying you can do it and then not being able to do it. The other one is getting paid to do something that you can't do, and you told them you could do, and that's not an imposter. That's a liar. That's a liar, and people do it. People do it all the time. People will lie themselves into jobs and fake it till you make it, like they say, and then when they get fired, they're like, oh well, I got I don't operate that way. I'm like, I don't know this. I do know this. I'm really, really good at this. And by the way, a lot of that is like knowing who you are. And speaking of Google and craziness, I've been reading this book just for fun. We got this book it was like in the trash bin, and not the trash bin. It was in a thrift store. Search Inside Yourself. It's this absolutely batshit crazy book made by the world's most jolly good fellow about how to search inside yourself. It's about basically how come Google is so successful. It's absolute load of crap. It's going to be really fun. There's a couple. I'm reading the whole thing. I'll do a review of it later. It's just a quick read, but I just thought that was funny. But the idea of actually understanding who you are, what you want to do, and what you're good at is fundamental to any of the interview process. If you don't know who you are and what you're capable of, you need to spend time on that. And the way you do that. So last night, give you a quick example, since we got time in this video left. If you really want to this is why self-assessing is so important. We're going to talk about this during the RWX method, when we do the beginner boost, about how important self-assessment is, because self-assessment is where the moment at which you translate imposter syndrome and individual effort, learning effort, exploration, all of that, RWX, into confidence. And as soon as you transform your learning exploration, and you transform, I'll be back. I'm going to read up. Okay. But as soon as you transform that into confidence, you're good to go. And the act of transforming it into confidence, I actually had an experience with this last night that I will talk to you for later, which does directly relate to this thing. But last night I've been coding on a bunch of stuff. within a month, I've had to learn all of containers. Right, my first one, I've had to learn all of Docker and Kind and write my own, create my own localized thing, set up my own local registry, learn RBAC, role-based account certification, everything, and put all this into a nice little package so that I could test, the use of this Python call into the Kubernetes API, which is this monstrous thing as well. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that there was a ton of stuff that I had to learn, a ton. And so last night, while I was wrapping it up and getting ready to deliver this particular piece, which is just one of many pieces I've been working on, there was a moment where I ran the whole script, and I actually could do it for you here. I ran the whole script. It did all of this complex, amazing stuff that I had been coding into it to get it to do. And it did all the things that I was asked to do for the deliverable. And it spoke back to me and said, to test passing and everything. And I had this moment of absolute elation. It was like that. I hate coding. I hate coding. I hate coding. It works. I love coding. It was that moment. And that was where my self-assessment came in. And so my imposter syndrome about whether I was good enough to do all of this stuff transformed in a small way into, oh my God, I can totally do this stuff. And now I'm totally ready for the next tasks at hand, because now I'm building on that confidence from that one little laboratory experiment. This is the whole X in RWX, and why I call them learning labs as opposed to challenges or something, because there was a bunch of exploration involved with the task that I was given in order to understand all the infrastructure and underlying technology to be able to deliver on this relatively simple task for somebody else in this space. But for me, being able to put it in that bundle and encapsulate it as a learning lab and then deliver it in that way, allowed me to see, oh my God, I really know this, and I'm ready. I'm ready to do the next thing. And I don't need to be ready to do all of it. And you guys know, you've heard me, in other videos, sound rather desperate at the amount of things I've been given to learn all at the same time. But there's two things that have saved me there. One of them is I didn't tell them any of this stuff up front, so I don't feel like a liar. I'm working my best and hardest, and I'm using a lot of my own time to learn this stuff. So I feel justified in that effort. Number two, I am working hard. I'm working really hard. And number three, I have a lot to show for it. And my confidence is incrementally increasing as I go, because I'm packaging the stuff I'm learning up into these like laboratories as I go, which takes a little bit of effort on my own time. But every time I do that, that includes a moment of self-reflection and assessment, which boosts my confidence and ultimately prepares me for interviews at work about this particular milestone, which I had today, or interviews to come, which are related to new opportunities. So bundling your learning using the RWX method, and then, or something like that, and into a lab and a moment of self-reflection and assessment is going to continue to promote your confidence, and it's going to combat the imposter syndrome that you build up, which I have a ton of right now still. But I don't like the word imposter syndrome. I think I'm going to stop using it, because it's not that you're an imposter. It's that you are being asked to do things you haven't learned yet. That's not an imposter, right? Now, the term imposter syndrome is, and that's another thing. So how do you prepare for the SRE interview? As I've said before, as I wrap up, number one, know the company, show genuine interest in what they're doing and in the team and in the job role, so that the technologies. Know the technologies involved. Know your stuff, so that when you go in there, you can talk about it. Know what you don't know, and be willing and honest to say what you don't know in the interview. You don't have anything to be afraid of, right? And if you have those two things, and you will have those two things if you've been going into the process of interviewing properly by considering the company before you even apply, and being an ongoing RWX autodidact learner, you'll know your stuff, because you have been preparing that. You've been preparing yourself for this job instead of that one extra game of whatever. You've spent the time preparing yourself, and you know what you don't know as well. So that's understanding what you want when you want out of it. So into that interview, be more confident in your ability to learn what you don't know yet. Yes. And I think that's, yeah, let's talk about that.